All right, you got yourself a hydraulic steering kit for your boat and you're doing a little bit of research before you're doing the install. You're in the right place. So my original cable steering system on my old Ranger was just getting tight. And I kept servicing it and I could have continued to do so, but I just got tired of doing it. The system had gotten so bad that it took 2 arms of just about full strength to steer, and that's just not safe. So I'm stepping up to a hydraulic system. I'm not going to bore you with how I got my old system out to get to this and get to that. What I will show you is a couple little tips before I start the install. First tip is when you pull out your hydraulic lines, on a good kit, they're going to mark it with a red and a blue. I'm going to do red for port and blue for starboard. Now what happens is on your helm here, you're going to hook up red to port, and at the back it's going to switch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that little cap and I'm going to trade it out with the blue one, so that when I am completing my install and I'm hooking up my lines back at the motor, I already know what goes where. If you don't have that, get yourself some electrical tape and mark one side or the other and just remember what you did. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you're going to have to remember to switch your lines at the back, which that might be confusing in itself. So I'm going to go ahead and switch these out. They just pull right out like that, so I'm just going to swap them. So during my disassembly, I did some destructive disassembly, shall we say. I ended up cutting everything off the end of my cables here. I started by using a Sawzall, and I went through 3 blades and didn't even make it through one of those cables. What I found worked really good was just a set of bolt cutters. And I cut through that and then just kind of folded it, fatigued the metal, and I mean, within less than 30 seconds I was through it. So I would recommend to you use bolt cutters if you have them. Now since I did this destructive disassembly, it gives me some options down here. What I'm going to do is take some regular old nylon line. You can use like 550 cord, anything like that. I'm going to tape that up to one of these cables, and the other cable I'm going to attach my hydraulic lines to. Now the reason I'm sending this through is just in case something goes wrong when I'm pulling my hydraulic lines through, I'll have this as a backup. And if I don't need this, it's going to be a real good asset to have maybe years down the road when I'm trying to run new electrical or something like that. So if you can, do that. Throughout this video, I'm going to make chapters for you, so if you're looking for something specific, you'll be able to get to it real easy. I'm not going to show you any of the disassembly because my boat is probably different than your boat, and really you don't need to watch the disassembly. You're here for what it's like to put things in. Any Mexican American can take stuff apart. Putting it together is the hard part, and that's why you're here, I assume. Okay, it's no matter to me which one of these I pull through first. Okay, so I just tape that up. I'm only pulling one at a time. Okay, I wiggle this guy and I determine that's the one that has my nylon line attached to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull that through. There's my nylon line. Okay, this guy I'm just going to tie onto something so that it doesn't disappear on me. Now we're going to come back up to the helm. We're going to secure our hydraulic lines to our old cable. Now here's where having a buddy might be helpful. I have these coils running the same direction, so they'll both feed out the same. That's clutch. I'm just going to get that started. Then what I need to do is just give myself some uncoiled line to pull through. Then I can come to the back and pull on my cable and get it to start feeding. Then unwind some more line. Come to the back of the boat, pull through until my loops are up. Ta-da! Does it matter if you feed from back to front or front to back? Absolutely not. I'm feeding front to back, that way I can do all my cuts back here, and I'll know that I got the slack and everything I want in later steps. So I'm just going to continue to feed this through until I have the required slack I need up here for the helm. So my old helm required about a 2-inch hole. My system, which happens to be a Vevor, but you could have a BayStar or a HyDrive or any of those other models, probably going to require about a 3-inch hole, but look at yourself. So that's about as big as that. So here's the issue a lot of you guys are going to have. You take your hole saw, there's nothing for the pilot bit to tap into. So you got a couple of methods you can do here. One is you can try and freehand it by starting it at an angle and getting yourself a little bit of bite. Chances are that's going to walk around and you are going to scratch up some fiberglass or whatever your material is up here. So what I did was I pre-drilled myself a pilot hole in a scrap piece of wood that'll fit in here pretty good. And I'm just going to go ahead and center that over the hole that is currently there. And now I'm just going to get up to speed and then push in. That's great. Now, check behind, make sure you don't have any wires or anything that you're about to mess up. Done. I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup, I'll be right back. So our old 3-hole mounting system isn't going to work. This one's a 4-hole mounting system. So here's an old trick. Take a flashlight or a spotlight or something and shine it up through that hole. Then you can take your template and you can line it right up. Now a lot of people just drill right through the paper. I don't like to do that in case I need this template because something didn't go right. Test fit successful. Now at this step, something you can remember to do to really save yourself a potential headache later is take your backing plate, feed it over your hydraulic lines. Then you can feed those hydraulic lines through your helm hole. Okay, on the back of our helm, we have a starboard and a port designation. I just want to show that before I get any fittings in the way. Now, we've got these 45-degree angle fittings that are going to fit in nice and snug. And then we're going to be in there, so we want them oriented this way. We've got them oriented the way we want. I'm just going to tighten up this locking nut. Good. Now we're going to do the same on the other side. It's important while you're doing all this that you keep contaminants out of these fittings, out of these holes. Keep things as clean as you can. Any contaminants in there can later cause you headaches. Okay, got a good orientation. Set that lock nut. Now some fellows will do all this work after they've mounted this in. I don't want to be upside down on my back under my nav station trying to get this all done. So we designated red will be port. Here's our port fitting. Okay. Unscrew that cap. Again, confirming port. And blue for starboard. Okay, we've got our fittings nice and snugged up. Now we are good to set our helm. Want to make sure our fill cap is oriented at the 12 o'clock position. Just like that. And since we were super smart earlier, our backing plate is there. If you didn't do this and you forgot about it, well, now you're cursing yourself, because you're going to have to take those fittings off and redo all that. All right, my backing plate fits. I'm going to take one nut. I'm going to screw it on there just to hold this backing plate in place. Like that. Now I'm going to use blue Loctite on all these nuts, just as a little good measure of something to do. All right. For now, we are done down here. Nice and clean. And we're ready to move to the back. Let's go to the transom. All right, we're back at the transom. We're making good progress. So here's what we're going to need. We need our hydraulic ram, some basic tools, a little bit of grease. Let's get to work. Okay, to make this easy, we're going to take one of these arms off by removing this nylon nut. Taking the arm off. I'm just going to take that washer off too so that I don't lose it. Now, I'm going to get my grease. Try not to make too much of a mess here. And I'm going to grease up this arm here. Nice little coating of grease there. Orient the arm correctly. Now we're just going to feed right in where the old arm went. Just like that. Got my head in the way. Now we have our mounting hole here. We have our mounting hole here. We're just going to need to make some adjustments between this and this to get us to line up with that hole up there. I'm going to try and we'll go around the other side so I can keep my head out of the way. Now, we'll get the bolts in, get the washer on. Probably only do that about 18 more times. Well, how about that? I got it. Okay, I've got that nice and snugged up. There's a locking nylon nut that's going to go on the top of that. This is where it might help to have some childlike fingers. Now that that's on and snugged up, we got to get this other arm in place. So back to our grease. Slide in there, line up there. Something I like to do on marine applications. If you ever think that you're gonna come and take something apart again, is use a little anti-seize. That especially goes for you guys that work in saltwater. Snug up. Travels well. Here's a good look at everything I did. We slipped these arms into the old receiver there. I lined up here, got that nut in, got that lock nut up on top. These are reversible. You have your bleeder here, and this is our fitting for our hydraulic lines. And over on this side, arm went into the old receiver, and we have that little nut. We have that nut that went on, holds it all in place. For sizing and attaching the hydraulic lines, we just need some basic stuff. Got to set up your wrenches that are going to fit on your fittings. Would help to have your hydraulic fluid ready and some cutting tools to work on your lines here. Let's get to fitting. So we have all of our hydraulic line that's coming from our helm. And I'm just going to lay that out here. And let's do our longest one first, which is port side. And remember, I switched them in the beginning, so I know that that's still red. If you didn't switch your colors, then here's where you need to switch, and you need to do your blue or your green. Now the trick with this is to figure out the longest length you're going to need. So what I'm going to do is turn the motor all the way. I can see this fitting here, and I want to leave myself enough slack so that I'm not kinking. You know, I don't want it to be super tight like this, because it's just going to end up kinking right here. Give yourself a little bit of slack. Running straight. And take your time with this and really think about what it's going to be doing. I'm going to hold that in place now, and I'm just going to swing the motor and exercise it. You can see even when I come all the way to the other side, that loop is not very intrusive. I don't think it's excessive. I feel like that is a good amount of slack. So we'll hold that there. I absolutely hate the way that cut, so I'm going to clean it up with my shears. Okay, that's a lot better. Next step, we're going to take our fitting apart. I believe this is called a ferrule. Take our little cap out. Now these ferrules thread on reverse thread. I see some guys use power tools to do this. I'm not going to recommend that. It goes on easy enough with your hand, and you know you're not stripping anything out. And you can see in there to know how far you have to seat it. I'll just take a wrench here at the very end. There we go. Now here's where your hydraulic fluid comes into play. I'm going to open that up. And I'm just going to dip that line in there. What that's going to do is give me a little bit of lubrication. Get that fit down in there. Now, this part swivels, so what you want to do is grab that collar underneath. Tell you, this takes a little bit of muscle. It's a brisk 34 degrees out, but with this coat and this hat and this work, I'm feeling warm. Okay, that guy's done. Again, red, port. I'm looking in there, I do see a seal in there. Okay, you might be tempted to put Teflon tape on this. Resist that temptation. Teflon tape and hydraulic systems generally don't get along very well. If any of that Teflon breaks off and gets in your system, it can really cause you some headaches. Okay, before we move on, I just want to go ahead and I think that's great. So again, we're going to pull her hard over, and we're going to work on sizing up. We're going to work on sizing up this other side. Okay, so again, I'm going to confirm my motor is hard over. So it's as far away as it's going to be. I'll make myself a nice loop here. I'll hold it in place. Turn her hard over the other direction. Yep, those are good loops. Hard over. Well, I can say I am happy with that. I'll cut her right there on the comma. Believe me when I tell you, these hydraulic lines are not easy to cut. Same process we did on the last one. Our ferrule's going to go on, reverse thread. Well, that last 1/4 inch is a monster. Remove our starboard dust cap. Remove our starboard plug from our hydraulic line. Here's a little finishing touch I like to do. Try and get this camera real close so you can see what I'm doing. There's a right way to put a zip tie. Most people just go on the outside this way, right? What I'm going to do is I want to fit this zip tie if I do it to the top, you can probably see better. So zip ties are asymmetrical. I'm going to take the end that protrudes and I'm going to stick it in between my 2 lines, and then I'm going to feed my zip tie in. Get that spaced out nice. Pull that tag end, and then I'm going to take my cutters turn that zip tie around, and I'm going to cut it off. Now why do I do it inside out? Because later when you're messing around back here, you don't want those sharp ends on the zip ties getting you. I'm just going to do a few of these zip ties just to dress this up a bit. I might add a couple more of these later, but for now that keeps things nice and orderly and neat. And those of you that know me know that's how I like things. Let's exercise the motor. hard over to the closest, and hard over to the furthest. Good. We have no kinking. Everything's looking good, nice and orderly. Only thing left now is put the steering wheel back on and bleed this baby out. Let's go. Okay, I had a bit of delay of game. It got well below freezing by the time I was gonna fill and bleed out this system. So we're back the next day, slightly above freezing, but only slightly. Anyway, let's get this done. All right, so my setup at the bleeders is a little different. What comes with your kit is this little 1-foot piece of line. I'm gonna recommend you go to the store, get yourself a roll so you can get a good 1.5 to 2 feet. And I'm going from one bleeder right to the other bleeder, so I have a loop. And I got both my bleeders cracked. Right? Both my bleeders are cracked, so they are just loose, but I don't want them leaking all over. What this does is make a loop, so that when I go up to the helm and start cranking that wheel over to apply fluid, we're just going to fill one side of the ram and go to the other. What you got to do with the helm is you remove that little, the little cap that was right here. We're going to attach our fill line. We're going to attach that to a bottle. Then I just taped my bottle onto a level. You can use a 2x4, you can hang it, whatever system you got. You just need to keep that above your helm. And then once I punch a little hole in here with a razor, that line is going to fill, and we're going to fill up our reservoir in here. Just going to start cutting that for my flap that I'm going to need later. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start cranking this wheel one way, and I'm just going to keep going. You can see we start getting our fluid in. Something you always want to be mindful of is that you don't have air starting to come back through here. There's my air coming out of my reservoir. I'm just going to keep turning over to starboard. You can turn over to port, whatever you want. At some point here, we're going to start seeing fluid back at our bleeder loop. There, I'm feeling a little bit of resistance now. So I think we're pumping fluid now. Okay, my bottle's about half. I'll start turning to port. I'm pulling a steady thing of fluid now again. There's some resistance. When I get to a point where I need to start refilling this, I just cut the bottom of the old bottle off. Myself topped off with more fluid. See, I got more air coming out of my reservoir here. Time to start cranking it so we have no more air coming through my bleeder loop at the back. Expel a little more air out of the reservoir by letting this relax for a second. Alright, while we're letting all that air get out of our reservoir, you can absolutely use the tube that the system came with. And you can do one side and then do the other, and it's going to help to have a partner, because you're going to need to crack the bleeder valve, close the bleeder valve, you know, use the little jar, all that stuff. This is a great way to do it as one man. You just make that loop back there. We're just going to keep cranking until we expel all the air out of the system. Either way, this is not something for the impatient man. This takes some time. When you're nearing the end of this bleeding process, you'll feel the resistance in your steering wheel of fluid. And you might come to some spots where the wheel gets loose again. That's air being reintroduced into your reservoir here, and that's when you want to pause and let that out. Yeah, there were a couple. When you do feel that, if you give it a couple cranks back the other way slowly until you feel some resistance, then you'll see it purge like that. We're running nice steady fluid back at the ram. I think we're about there. I think I'm going to start turning to port now. Just make sure we got everything out. This should start turning the engine over. This feels great, and all I'm getting is little micro bubbles. Lock off these bleeders. Back in a mess. Now that our bleeders are locked off, we should have nice tight steering. Boy, does that steer easy. I'm excited. If the way the helm is performing right now is any indication of what I can expect on the water, I am super stoked with this upgrade. Look at this, one finger. Our little micro bubbles are just about done. I'm probably nitpicking here. Just figure the more air I can get out now, the more time I have before I have to bleed anything. Just in case we do have any of these residual little air bubbles. Now, one last adjustment I want to do. I want to get that motor centered up. Boy, we're not too far off. Okay, we look centered up, and that steering wheel's about centered up, so no worries. But say we were 180 degrees out and we didn't like that, all you have to do is crack both those bleeders while you still have that loop in place. Get your steering wheel to where you want it, and then go ahead and relock those bleeder valves. And that's the easy way to reposition your steering wheel. Nothing worse than cruising down the lake straight and your steering wheel's like that, or like that. Okay, I'm just going to exercise this wheel a couple more times just to make myself a little more confident that we don't have any air in this reservoir. I'm going to do a little cleanup, then I'll come back, we'll do a little recap, and I'll tell you some other little tips I learned along the way. All right, I anticipate this is going to be a little tricky, maybe even a little messy. Since this joint wants to come apart anyway, and my bottle's fixed, I think I'm just going to pull that off and let it flow into here. Yep, that was a little messy. Not horrible. Now, in theory, if I hold my finger over the end of this tube as I unscrew it, it should hold a vacuum. Yep, and it keeps a lot of my fluid in. Get our cap on there finger tight. Boy, that travels so nice. That really is silky smooth. It's so easy to do. Oh my gosh, I wish I had done this years ago. So like I said in the introduction, you probably got yourself a hydraulic steering kit or you're thinking about getting one. I hope this video was as down dirty to the point. I didn't want to waste your time with me running tools. Anything that didn't need to be there, I'm going to try and edit out. I really just brass tacks. I'm trying to make the best video on YouTube for how to install these things to give you guys the confidence to go ahead and order one up and put it in. I consider myself a very handy guy, but I do believe that anybody can do this. If you have any kind of mechanical aptitude and basic tools, you're in. Don't hesitate to do this. It's not hard. It just takes a little bit of time. I will say I probably put 2 hours into my disassembly of my old system. And like I said, I did destructive disassembly. If you were really going to try and like salvage your old system for some reason, it might take you a little longer. I'm not sure. Again, don't use a Sawzall, don't use a hacksaw to get through those stainless steel cables. Use yourself a bolt cutter, save yourself a lot of grief, save yourself some blades. What else did I learn along the way? I gave you a lot of the good tips. One thing I will say, on these bleeders right here, if you're going to use that loop system that I did, don't loosen these too much because you'll end up sucking some air in. You want those just loose enough to where you're maybe not moving the motor too much. But my motor did end up squeaking a little bit just because I was right on that edge. So I was squeaking the motor a little bit, port or starboard, and I think that's right where you want to be. I was a little too loose in the beginning, and I think I was just reintroducing air into my system. So now that I have hydraulic steering, this is the stuff that's going to find a home on my boat. I'm going to have my little fill kit. I'm going to have my bleeder kit. I'm going to keep this section in case I need to do the loop again. I got the little cap fitting, and I'm going to keep my hydraulic steering fluid on board just in case I come up with an issue where I got a bleeder out. I used barely over a quart of fluid on my system. I have an 18-foot boat. I'm not sure exactly how long the hoses were that I ran, but I would think if you're in the 18, 20, 22-foot boat range, 2 quarts is going to do you just fine, and you're going to have enough extra to hold you over. Again, I hope this gave you the confidence to go ahead and knock out your system when you get it, and good luck to you. We'll see you.